through. A couple topics to get through. I understand it's just a couple days before fiscal end, so we won't take up too much of your time. So topics today, a new release off master job aid posted, but don't worry, none of the processes have actually changed. Just did some reformatting, cleaned up a couple things that might have been vague, and that was posted this morning. But just there are new. We're not bringing new processes in 2 days before the end of fiscal year. I promise. Okay. And then a bit of activity today. We're going to be talking about how you can add vendors once a bid has already been sent. So maybe vendors that are new to bid by, or maybe they just got into the small business set aside program and they got an IPG, but they want to be able to access those small purchases that are currently out on the street. There is a way to do that. And then a reminder about JCAR rules that are in effect, but we will have a training that will be forthcoming. Then our fun fact of the day and our quote or thought of the day. All right, so first off, just the new release off Master Job Aid, and it says enhanced, and so we're going to kind of talk about what that is. So like I said, no reason to freak out. I'm not going to drop a new process on you 2 days before the end of fiscal. So no new processes, but the steps do include, or the new job aid does include, how to search for items using that catalog feature. We've been training on this for quite a while now, and we just have the job aid now matching that process. So when I say enhanced, really all that means is you can search for items using from the home screen and then add to a rec. So that's when we do bid by training. For those of you that have attended, we train on how to do both. So the first part is you can go in and search for an item just from the home screen. Then it brings up all of those items. You can add to a rec from that point. The non-enhanced, which is just means that you're going to create a requisition from scratch. And then when you get to the items tab, so you have to fill out the general tab first. Then when you get to the items tab, you search for items from master contracts there. Everything else is exactly the same. There really is just that small little tweak and a slight difference in how you're searching for items. Are you searching from the home screen to at the very beginning of the process, or are you going to create a rec from scratch, then go in and search for items in the items tab? So at the end of the day, it's going to get you to the same thing, but we've added those steps for that quote enhanced version on the new job aid that is posted, which is version 22.1. Again, no new processes. Want to highlight that. Nothing is changing. We don't want to drop that on you right now. And also, it was just reformatted that job aid to match all the others. So I put the boxes in there for attachments that you would attach a vendor quote if applicable, or greater discount information, as well as a couple other things that just to match the formatting of all our other job aids as we've updated them. And then I've dropped in the link that everybody should have as a favorite on their browser, my humble opinion, for our job aids. Okay, so now let's move on to our main topic today, how you can add vendors once a bid is sent. Okay, so we have a process. I'm going to walk through a slide or two here, and then I'm going to go out and just show you how you do it in the system. And so the common scenario here is a vendor is new to bid by and contacts an agency to add them to a bid. Another more specific scenario where I think this is probably going to come in handy even more is on a small purchase that is currently set aside for small businesses. So you do not have a waiver yet. This is only going out to small businesses, and a vendor just got set up in the small business set aside program yesterday, and if they're not on that bidders list, so this is all going to, setting the table here, this is really for those vendors that are new to the small business set aside program, and within that window of your 3 to 5 days where you are putting out a small purchase, but if the vendor is not on that bidders list, they wouldn't have access to it. So I know this is a pretty specific scenario, but it does happen since our IPG team is vetting, and new small business set aside program vendors are coming in daily. Okay, so this is a real life example that we do see. Okay, so a vendor is maybe new, and then they contact the agency saying, um, I want to be able to be added to any small purchases that are using this NIGP code. You do have an option to do that here. So a vendor is new. They weren't included on that original bidders tab because only small businesses were notified at that time. Okay, so one note to kind of keep in mind is any vendor other than small purchases that are set aside for small business set aside vendors, right? I think we're all clear on that so far. Any vendor can view solicitations and submit a quote. So if it's not a small purchase that's currently only set aside for small businesses, right, that it's restricted, if a vendor contacts you, it is okay to let them know that they can search in BidBuy and they are able to submit a quote and search for solicitations. They can search by NIGP code. They can search by description. There's a couple different things that they can find all the solicitations for. Um, that's not a reportable communication. When we do training, we talk about reportable communication, what you can and can't say to a vendor. That's okay because you're not talking about the procurement itself. You're talking about procedure and practice. Now you're not going to get into discussing any sort of specifications or anything like that. We always want to point them back to the solicitation, right? But it is okay to say, vendor, you can search for bids in BidBuy by searching for this bid number or searching by NIGP code. That's just, we're just helping vendors out, and that is procedure and practice. So that is absolutely okay to say. Okay, so vendors can always search for solicitations and bidding opportunities. The situation where I'm talking about is they wouldn't be able to see a small purchase that was restricted to small business set-aside program vendors if they weren't on that original bidders list. Okay. So adding bidders, again, I'm going to kind of just walk through it real quick because it's slightly different than the way we do when you're adding all vendors with that NIGP code. And then I'll go in and talk through how that's done. Okay, so slight change compared to when you initially search for vendors. You're going to click look up and add vendors. And then in this case, you're going to be actually searching by the vendor name, right? Because normally you'd be searching for all vendors with NIGP code 91803, right? Um, and then clicking, depending upon if it's if it's set aside for small businesses or not, you'd be searching for that. Then you'd save and exit. In this example, Dave's Kazoos and Canoes calls the agency, says, "Hey, I just got in to BidBuy. I'm trying to find solicitation opportunities. Are there any small purchases for kazoos or canoes?" I guess I don't know. Um, and you can add them that way by going in and then searching by the vendor name. Okay, I see a couple of questions here. Let me go back and hit that. So a vendor can submit quotes on NIGP codes they're not listed under. Absolutely, yes. The NIGP codes that they're listed under is purely for them how to receive a notification. So that's why we use NIGP codes when you're adding vendors, because presumably those vendors are the ones that can provide those goods or services for that NIGP code. But the NIGP code is really all about notification. If I'm a vendor, I do not have to be registered under a certain NIGP code to submit a quote to anything. Okay. Let's see, another question. Can they just go in and add themselves, or do they have to reach out to us to add them? So vendors cannot add themselves to the bidders list. This would be something that would have to come from the agency internally to add themselves to the bidders list. Now, again, this is really specific to that small window on a small purchase, because the one thing that I'm going to get into here in just a second is it does help the vendor. It makes it easier for the vendor to find the bid if they're on the bidders list. But we're going to talk about that in just a second here. Vendor does not have to be registered to BidBuy to submit a bid. No, they have to be registered in BidBuy to submit a bid. They do not have to be registered in that NIGP code to submit a bid. Okay, sorry, if I said that wrong, I want to make sure I'm very clear. You have to be registered in BidBuy to be able to submit a quote, for sure. but you do not have to be registered for that NIGP code in order to submit a quote. So I could be registered for no NIGP codes in BidBuy. I can always just go in and search, and then I could submit a quote to anything for any agency. Okay. Another question, not sure I understood your scenario. A vendor contacts us after we publish the solicitation. How do they know about the solicitation if they couldn't see it? Okay, so my scenario is I'm a small business set-aside vendor. I'm brand new to BidBuy, and I just got into the small business set-aside program. Now, so today I just got in. 2 days ago, your agency might have put out a small purchase that was set aside for small businesses. Me as a vendor, I wasn't registered in the program at that time, so I would not have had a chance to see that. And even if I search for that anything under that NIGP code, since it's restricted to that original bidders list from 2 days ago, I would not be able to see it. So we have seen this happen where a vendor contacts us or an agency, says, "Hey, I'm new to the whole procurement game. Um, can I be added on to any bidders list that I might be able to see?" And so there's an option here. Now, I don't think you're under any sort of obligation to go in and be constantly searching for new vendors that could potentially fit, because on a small purchase, those are intended to move pretty quickly, right? So we're talking about that 3 to 5 day window, but we have seen that happen. And so we just want to let you know that there is an option within the system to do that, because, right, if they're in the small business set aside program, we want more vendors competing, right? That's the pillar of our public procurement, right? We want more vendors. We want more competition, right? Better supplies, better services, better pricing. Okay. Let's see. Now, the other question that you might get, so I'm kind of talking about two different things. That's the small purchase example. The other example is, hey, I'd like to be added to the bidders list. I'm just new to BidBuy. Let's take the whole small purchase thing out of the whole scenario. At that point, you can say, well, you can always search for all your bidding opportunities in BidBuy. Okay, and that's quite okay as well, because you're talking about procedure and practice. You're not talking about different, you're not getting into specifications. You're not getting into the actual procurement details. We don't want to do that. We always want to point our vendors back to all the information that is in BidBuy. That way everybody's on the same page. Nobody has any different information than anybody else. But in terms of the bidders list itself, it does make it so at this point you're adding them, and there's one quick note here regarding this. So the vendor is going to be added to that bidders list, which makes it easier for the vendor to find the bid on their homepage. They don't have to go in and search. And because if you're a vendor and you're on a bidders list, you log in and it just shows you all of your those open bids that you are on the bidders list for. So it makes it easier if for that vendor, but in no shape or form does it preclude them from being able to search for any solicitations using NIGP code or description or title, anything like that. Okay, but the key difference here is when you add a bidder after it's been sent, so this is important, they do not automatically receive a notification from BidBuy. Okay, so why don't I go out and actually walk through that? You do have an option to, the only way to notify all vendors is to create a bid amendment. So you do have the option. I think there are pros and cons to doing a bid amendment when you're adding a new vendor. You could add a comment saying adding new vendors, and then all vendors are notified. And that's the only way that one vendor is going to receive a notification from the system. Now, again, because this is procedure and practice, it would be perfectly okay to email a vendor saying that they have been added to a bidders list, right? Again, we're not getting into the procurement. It's purely procedure and practice. That would be okay. I'm just kind of brainstorming the options in order to notify the vendor from the system itself. And you could do that doing a bid amendment. You at that point you're notifying all the vendors in order to notify one vendor or two or three, depending on what it is. So we're I'm not weighing in on whether you should or should not. I think it's just from a system standpoint, it's an option there. But just a reminder that SPOs must apply all bid amendments. So if you do choose to go that route, make sure that your SPO knows and that they are applying all those bid amendments. Okay, so real quick, I'm just going to walk you through that real quick, what it looks like. Let's go. So I'm in my training environment here. I'm just going to go to a bid that is in sent status, right? So I've already put it out. I'm going to go to my bidders. You can see that I still have the option to look up and add vendors. So I look up and add vendors. This all looks familiar to us, right? This is the way it would normally look when you go in and add your vendors initially. But here I'm actually going to search for Dave for my vendor, because Dave's Kazoos and Canoes was not a part of the original bidders list, but we want to add them now because now they're available for this. So then I hit save and exit. And so what you can see here is they're added to this bidders list, but originally, Dave's Corporation, you can see the notifications. The email went to this to the vendor on this date, this date. The vendor Dave's Kazoos and Canoes were not automatically added here, so that doesn't work. Even the add manual delivery function will not actually notify that vendor. So at this stage of the game, if I were to log in under Dave's Kazoos and Canoes as a vendor account, they're going to be able to see that open bid right there, and they wouldn't have to go in and search for it. And if this were a small purchase that was set aside for small businesses, now that Dave's Kazoos and Canoes would be able to see that, whereas they wouldn't be able to before. Okay. All right. I think I missed a question. Let's go back. Can we add vendors up until or even after bid opening? Well, not after the bid opening, right? You could add vendors up to that point. Now, depending on the number and those sorts of things, it might get a specific question to your SPO, because if you're adding a bunch of vendors the day before a bid opening, for instance, like that, you might want to, there might be a possibility that you would push that bid opening date back. There could be a number of scenarios in which that might be appropriate or not. But in terms of adding bidders after the bid opening, no, you cannot, because the bid's open, right? So there's no reason to add vendors at that point. Another question, how do I use the receipt function? Do I need to use this function? Nope, we do not utilize the receipt function in BidBuy. You can just ignore it. BidBuy is a configurable, it's an off-the-shelf system that's been configured to the state of Illinois' needs. However, we don't utilize the receipt function, so you can just ignore it. Also, I had a vendor say once the bid is accepted, he can no longer access the attachments. That's interesting, because as a vendor, they can. They can also withdraw their quote and change documents, add documents, and then resubmit their quote. So if they have any other specific questions, please reach out to me, and maybe we can walk them through that, or you can get a better understanding. So, but in terms of accessing the attachments, they should be able to, because as a vendor, you can go in and see all the quotes that you've submitted, all the contracts, all the documents that the vendor has submitted, and it's all in there. So that's a nice perk for the vendor community as well. Okay, we go back to our slides. All right, so just a reminder, next Wednesday we have our initial or our first Wednesday of each month, our Introduction to Illinois Procurement course that's available. A link is to register there. Go ahead and register. It's the first Wednesday of every month, 9 o'clock to about noon. We talk about who's involved in procurement, what are their responsibilities, how is a procurement conducted, the procurement methods are introduced, vendor requirements, all the paperwork and all the financial disclosures and Board of Elections registration and Department of Human Rights registration, all those vendor requirements, we talk about those. We also discuss communications, what you can and can't say to the vendor. It's been approved for 2 credit hours by UPPCC. So if this is perfect for anybody that is new-ish to procurement or anybody that would just like a quick refresher, it's not a deep dive on any one topic, but it's an introduction course. Another question, how does the PO get finalized? So the PO gets finalized once it's sent, and then depending on if you have an executed contract, that gets added via a bid buy change order. But we don't use the function in bid buy the where we use that receipt function, and there's a couple other statuses that are available. Once the PO is in send status, and then depending on the value of the procurement, if you have a executed contract or not, once that fully executed contract is attached and all the procurement file documents are complete, you're done. Okay. Just a reminder, Joint Committee on Administrative Rules, JCAR, those rules are currently in effect. I got a link for you directly there. We're not going to do a training today because, of course, of the time of year it is, but we're going to do a training very shortly after the fiscal year. And so sit tight and look forward for that. Fiscal year end final push. You can do it, right? We can do it. You're there. Final link to our training center, Training Tuesday page, all of our trainings that are available to you. We always keep this slide in there. Fun fact of the day. On this day, 15 years ago, the iPhone was launched for the very first time. A link there to thehistory.com, and our world was never the same. Some say for the better, some say for worse. I'll let you decide. And then my thought of the day, mental toughness is often portrayed as determination and persistence, which I think it is, but it can also be flexibility and adaptability. I can be happy anywhere. I can work with what I have. I can have a good day with anyone. You're tough when your mood is not dependent upon your conditions. I love that. James Clear, my man, James Clear. And Lance, you did not get your certification from the last training. I'll reach out to you right now and we'll get that taken care of. All right, thanks everybody. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us at cpogs.training@illinois.gov. Go forth and procure and have a great rest of your fiscal year, and we'll talk next week. Thanks everybody.